Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Rain hammered my HVAC van like bullets as I pulled into the driveway of our cramped duplex. Another 12-hour day fixing other people's broken air conditioners while my own life fell apart in slow motion. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days making sure everyone else stayed comfortable while I lived in a constant state of unease. My name's Adam Carson, and at 39, I thought I had life figured out. I fix heating and cooling systems for a living, which means I know when something's running hot or cold. What I didn't know was that my girlfriend Kara had been running both hot and cold with half the city behind my back. I should have seen the signs earlier. The late nights with the girls, the new workout routine that required designer gym clothes, the way she'd suddenly become protective of her phone, clutching it like a lifeline whenever I walked into a room. But the biggest red flag came 3 weeks ago during what I now call the Dinner of Lies. Kara had invited her 3 best friends over, Nina, Julia, and Megan, for what she called a special announcement dinner. I'd spent the afternoon making my famous chili, thinking maybe she was finally ready to talk marriage or moving to a better neighborhood. Instead, I got blindsided. "Adam, honey, sit down," Kara said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She was wearing that red dress I'd bought her for Christmas, the one that made her look like $1 million and probably cost me a week's pay. Nina, the wild one with bleached blonde hair and a mouth that could make a sailor blush, was practically bouncing in her chair. Julia, always the supportive one with her perfect Instagram smile, had her phone ready like she was about to document history. Megan, Kara's supposed best friend since college, sat there with this knowing smirk that should have warned me. "What's going on?" I asked, settling into my chair and noticing how all 4 women were staring at me like I was some kind of specimen. Kara took a deep breath, reached across the table, and grabbed my hands. "Adam, we're pregnant." The room spun. We'd been together for 3 years, and while we'd talked about kids someday, we'd never actively tried. In fact, I was pretty sure we'd been careful. That's amazing," I managed, trying to process the information while Nina giggled and Julia started taking pictures. "But wait," Kara continued, her eyes sparkling with something I couldn't quite identify. "There's more." "More? How could there be more?" "It's triplets, baby. 3 little ones. Can you believe it?" The math hit me like a freight train. 3 babies. 3 college funds. 3 of everything. On my HVAC technician salary. But it wasn't the money that made my stomach drop. It was the way Nina whispered something to Julia that made them both burst into laughter. It was the way Megan kept glancing between Kara and me like she was watching a tennis match. It was the way Kara's grip on my hands felt less like excitement and more like she was trying to anchor me to the spot. "Triplets?" I repeated, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Start planning, honey," Kara said, finally releasing my hands to accept congratulatory hugs from her friends. "We're going to need a bigger place, a bigger car, bigger everything." As the women chattered about baby names and nursery themes, I excused myself to get more drinks from the kitchen. That's when I overheard Nina's voice carrying from the dining room. "Girl, you better hope he doesn't do the math on those conception dates," she said, followed by more giggling. My blood turned to ice water. I stood there in my own kitchen, holding a pitcher of lemonade, while the pieces of my life rearranged themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. Conception dates, plural, as in more than one possible time frame. The rest of that dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and congratulations. I played the part of the excited father-to-be while my mind raced through the past few months, trying to remember when Kara and I had been together versus when she'd been out with the girls. After everyone left, I tried to bring up my concerns, but Kara shut me down with tears and accusations that I wasn't happy about becoming a father. She spent the night at Megan's place, claiming she needed support from people who actually cared about her happiness. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of me walking around with a smile plastered on my face while privately wondering if I was about to become the father of triplets or the biggest fool in the city. The answer came yesterday, and it was worse than I'd imagined. I'd been suspicious enough to do some digging. When you fix HVAC systems, you learn to be thorough, to check every connection and make sure everything's working the way it should, so I applied that same methodology to my relationship. I found Kara's old phone, the one she claimed was broken, hidden in her jewelry box. It wasn't broken. It was just full of evidence. Text messages with someone named Brent, a gym owner with arms like tree trunks and an ego to match. Messages that made it clear they'd been more than just workout partners. Photos that left nothing to the imagination. Plans to meet up on nights when Kara told me she was having girls' nights. But Brent wasn't the only one. There were messages with someone called Jay that were equally explicit, and a group chat with Nina, Julia, and Megan titled Baby Daddy Bingo, where they literally placed bets on who the father or fathers might be. My name was on the list, but I wasn't the favorite. The group chat was a masterclass in betrayal. Nina bragging about her stamina tests with various guys, Julia discussing her brother's contribution to the gene pool, Megan encouraging Kara to keep all options open until the tests come back. Tests, plural. Because apparently even Kara wasn't sure which of her multiple partners had contributed to her pregnancy. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, it was the way they talked about me in that chat. Adam's so clueless. He'll probably be grateful just to be included. At least he has a steady job to pay for everything. I was their backup plan, their safety net, the reliable guy who would step up and take responsibility for whatever mess they'd created. That's when I decided to get my own test done. Getting DNA tests for unborn triplets isn't as straightforward as those paternity test commercials make it seem. It requires a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, which costs more than I make in a week and requires Kara's cooperation to get her blood drawn. Fortunately, I had help from an unexpected source. Rick Martinez runs O'Malley's bar downtown, and he's been my friend since high school. When I told him my situation over a beer and showed him screenshots of the group chat, his reaction was immediate and profane. That's messed up, man. Even for Kara, that's next level messed up. Rick had never liked Kara, though he'd been polite enough to keep his opinions to himself. Until now. You know what you gotta do, right? He said, refilling my beer without being asked. You gotta get proof. Real proof. Not just screenshots that could be faked. How am I supposed to get her to agree to a paternity test? She thinks I'm over the moon about becoming a dad. Rick grinned, and I recognized that look. It was the same expression he'd worn in high school when he convinced the principal that the senior prank was actually a team-building exercise. Leave that to me. 2 days later, Kara came home excited about a free prenatal health screening she'd won in a contest she didn't remember entering. The screening included comprehensive blood work that would ensure the healthiest possible pregnancy. Rick's cousin worked at a medical lab, and apparently the family business extended beyond serving drinks. While we waited for the results, I had to maintain the charade of excited, expectant father. Kara had thrown herself into pregnancy planning with the enthusiasm of someone spending someone else's money. We need to start looking at houses, she announced one morning over breakfast. 3 bedrooms minimum, good school district, big backyard for the kids to play. I nearly choked on my coffee. Houses? Kara, we can barely afford this place. That's why we need to plan ahead, she said, sliding a stack of real estate listings across the table. I've already talked to a realtor. With your income and my savings, we could qualify for a decent mortgage. Her savings. Right. The same savings account she'd been building up with money from her freelance consulting work. Work that apparently involved a lot of late-night meetings with clients who looked suspiciously like Brent. Don't you think we should wait until after the babies are born? I suggested. Make sure everything's healthy, get settled into a routine. Kara's expression shifted, and for a moment, I saw something cold flash in her eyes. Adam, I need to know you're committed to this. To us. To our family. Our family. The words should have warmed my heart. Instead, they felt like a trap closing around my ankles. Of course I'm committed, I lied. I just want to be smart about it. That seemed to satisfy her, and she went back to circling houses we couldn't afford while I silently counted down the days until the test results arrived. They came on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of installing a new air conditioning unit at a downtown office building when Rick called. You need to see this, he said without preamble. Meet me at the bar. Now. I finished up the installation in record time and drove across town with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Rick was waiting in the back office with an envelope that looked like it contained either my salvation or my destruction. You sure you want to know? He asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Rick opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of official-looking paperwork. His expression told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. None of them are yours, man. Not a single one. The room tilted sideways. Even though I'd suspected, even though I'd seen the evidence, part of me had hoped I was wrong. Part of me had wanted to believe that Kara's betrayal had limits. It gets worse, Rick continued, scanning the detailed results. According to this, the 3 babies have 3 different fathers. 3 different fathers. 3 separate acts of betrayal. 3 different men who had been with my girlfriend while I was working 60-hour weeks to build a future with her. Do we know who? I asked. Rick nodded grimly. Based on the genetic markers and the database matches, It looks like one belongs to Brent Thompson. That's the gym guy. One belongs to Marcus Webb. Wait, Marcus Webb? Julia's brother Marcus? The same. And the third? Rick paused, checking the paperwork again. The third belongs to someone named David Chen. David Chen, Nina's ex-boyfriend, the one she claimed to hate but apparently hadn't stopped sleeping with. I sat there in Rick's office, staring at the proof of my girlfriend's infidelity, and felt something inside me break and rebuild itself into something harder. What are you going to do? Rick asked. I thought about the house listings on our kitchen table. I thought about Kara's plans to spend my money raising other men's children while continuing to lie to my face. I thought about the group chat where her friends laughed about my cluelessness. I'm going to tell her I know, I said. All of it, in front of everyone. When? I checked my watch. It was Thursday afternoon. Kara had mentioned that she and the girls were planning a celebration dinner for Friday night to toast the pregnancy and make more plans for the future. Tomorrow night, at their celebration dinner. Rick grinned. You want backup? Actually, yes. Can you cater the event? I'll tell Kara I want to surprise her with professional service for such a special occasion. Consider it done. This is going to be epic. As I drove home that evening, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. The uncertainty was over. The lies were about to be exposed, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I was the one with the upper hand. Kara was in the living room when I walked in, surrounded by baby catalogs and nursery design magazines. How was work, honey? She asked without looking up. Educational, I replied. Very educational. Friday night arrived with the same gray drizzle that had been haunting the city for weeks. I spent the day at work, going through the motions of fixing other people's problems while mentally rehearsing what I was going to say when the moment came. Kara had been unusually affectionate all week, probably sensing that something was different about my mood. She'd made my favorite breakfast every morning, suggested watching movies together, even hinted at intimacy in a way she hadn't for months. It was too little, too late, but I played along. Let her think her charm offensive was working. I can't believe you arranged for Rick to cater tonight, she said as she got ready, applying makeup with the precision of someone preparing for battle. That's so sweet of you. I wanted tonight to be special, I replied, and it wasn't entirely a lie. Tonight would definitely be special, just not in the way she expected. The dinner was set for 7 o'clock at our place. Nina, Julia, and Megan would be there, along with Brent, who Kara had invited as her trainer friend to celebrate her fitness journey during pregnancy. Marcus Webb was coming too, supposedly because Julia wanted her brother to meet her pregnant friend. David Chen had been invited by Nina, who claimed she wanted to mend fences with her ex. It was going to be a regular family reunion. Rick arrived at 6:30 with enough food to feed an army and a knowing look in his eyes. He'd brought his best server, a college kid named Tommy who was sworn to secrecy and instructed to keep everyone's glasses full. You ready for this? Rick asked as we set up the dining room. I patted the manila envelope in my jacket pocket. More than ready. The guests started arriving at 7 sharp. Nina came first, wearing a dress that barely qualified as clothing and immediately helping herself to the wine. Julia followed with Marcus in tow, a tall, athletic guy who looked uncomfortable being there. Megan arrived with a gift bag full of baby items and that same knowing smirk she'd worn at the original announcement dinner. Brent showed up fashionably late, driving the souped-up Dodge Charger that had probably cost more than I made in 2 years. He was exactly what I'd expected from his photos, all muscles and ego, with a handshake designed to prove his dominance. So you're the lucky guy, he said when Kara introduced us. Must be exciting, becoming a dad to triplets. Oh, it's been full of surprises, I replied, meeting his grip with one of my own. Years of manual labor had given me hands that could crush walnuts, and I made sure Brent felt it. David Chen arrived last, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Nina's greeting was overly enthusiastic, confirming that their hatred was just another lie in a web of deception. Once everyone was seated and Rick's team had served the appetizers, Kara stood up with a glass of sparkling cider, ready to make another speech about our bright future together. Before you start, I said, standing up and pulling out the manila envelope, I have something to share with everyone. Kara's smile faltered slightly. Adam, what are you doing? I'm sharing some test results that I think everyone will find interesting. I opened the envelope and pulled out copies of the DNA report, handing one to each person at the table. The room fell silent except for the sound of papers rustling and sharp intakes of breath. Nina was the first to speak. What the hell is this? Those are paternity test results for the triplets, I said calmly. Turns out, Kara's pregnancy is even more special than we thought. Kara had gone pale, her hand gripping her cider glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Adam, how could you? How could I what? Find out the truth. I looked around the table at the faces staring back at me, shock, guilt, anger, and in Brent's case, something that looked like panic. According to these results, each of the 3 babies has a different father, and none of them are me. Julia dropped her copy of the report like it was on fire. This is insane. You can't just what? Prove that my girlfriend has been cheating on me with at least 3 different men? I turned to face each of the guilty parties. Congratulations, Brent. You're going to be a father. You too, Marcus. And David, surprise. Your ex-girlfriend Nina helped create a baby, just not with the person she claimed. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over. I don't know what kind of sick game this is. Sit down, Marcus, I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd finally taken control of the situation. This isn't a game. This is your nephew or niece we're talking about. Your sister Julia knew all about it. All eyes turned to Julia, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I didn't know it would go this far. Didn't know what would go this far? Marcus demanded. Julia, what is he talking about? Before Julia could answer, I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots of the group chat. Maybe this will clarify things. I began reading from the messages, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. From the group chat titled Baby Daddy Bingo, Nina wrote, $20 says it's Brent's. That man's got swimmers like Michael Phelps. Julia responded, my money's on my brother. He always was an overachiever. And Megan added, as long as Adam doesn't figure it out until after he signs a lease on a bigger place. The silence that followed was deafening. Brent was the first to break. Look, man, I didn't know she was serious with anyone. Shut up, I said, my voice cutting through his excuse like a blade. Just shut up. I turned to Kara, who was now crying, though I couldn't tell if the tears were from shame or anger at being caught. 3 years, I said to her. 3 years of my life. 3 years of planning a future, of working extra hours to save money for our dreams, of believing that what we had was real. Adam, please let me explain, she started. Explain what? How you've been sleeping with multiple men while I was working to support us? How you and your friends turned my life into a joke? How you plan to trick me into raising other men's children while continuing to cheat behind my back? The tears were flowing freely now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, just a cold satisfaction at finally speaking the truth. The house hunting stops now, I continued. The wedding planning that I know you've been doing in secret stops now. The lies stop now. I looked around the table one more time, meeting each person's eyes. Brent, you can start saving for child support. Marcus, you might want to have a conversation with your sister about boundaries. David, congratulations on becoming a father with your ex-girlfriend. And Nina, Julia, Megan, you can all stop pretending to be my friends. I stood up and walked toward the door, leaving behind the chaos of voices all trying to speak at once. Adam, wait, Kara called out, but I didn't turn around. Enjoy your celebration dinner, I said without looking back. Rick will handle the cleanup. Send me the bill for the paternity tests, gentlemen. It's the least I can do for the real fathers. As I walked out into the drizzling rain, I heard the explosion of arguments beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation and denial, chairs scraping against the floor, someone, probably Nina, screaming profanities. But I was done with all of it. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, I woke up in a motel room across town. I'd driven around for hours after leaving the dinner party from hell, finally checking into the cheapest place I could find that didn't look like a crime scene. My phone had been buzzing all night with calls and texts that I'd ignored. 23 missed calls from Kara, 15 from Megan, 8 from Nina, and surprisingly, 3 from Marcus Webb. I decided to start with Marcus. Adam, thank God you answered, he said when I called him back. I need to talk to you about last night. What about it? I had no idea about any of it. Julia never told me she was involved in whatever this is. I believed him. Marcus had looked genuinely shocked when the truth came out, and his anger at his sister had seemed real. What do you want from me? I asked. I want to help you. This whole thing is messed up, and my sister was part of it. I owe you. That was unexpected. Help me how? I work in IT security. If you want to make sure this story gets out, gets documented properly, I can help with that. These people destroyed your life. They shouldn't get to just move on like nothing happened. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to just disappear, start over somewhere else, forget any of this ever happened. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated and lied to for months, wanted consequences. What did you have in mind? Meet me for coffee. I'll show you. An hour later, I was sitting across from Marcus in a downtown cafe, watching him work on his laptop with the focused intensity of a surgeon. "Social media is forever," he explained as he typed, "and people love a good revenge story, especially when it involves this level of betrayal." He'd created a comprehensive digital timeline of events, complete with screenshots of the group chat, photos of the DNA test results, and a detailed narrative of how the deception had unfolded. "I'm not posting this to be vindictive," he said. "I'm posting it because people like Kara and her friends count on their victims staying quiet out of embarrassment. They count on shame keeping their secrets safe." He was right. How many other guys had they done this to? How many other lives had they treated like a game? "Do it," I said. Marcus hit publish, and within minutes, the story was spreading across multiple platforms. The group chat screenshots were particularly damaging. Seeing the actual words, the casual cruelty, the betting pool on paternity made the betrayal real in a way that just telling the story couldn't match. By noon, it had been shared hundreds of times. By evening, it was viral. But I wasn't done. While Marcus handled the digital warfare, I had some real-world business to attend to, starting with Brent's gym. Brent owned Iron Paradise, a trendy fitness center that catered to social media influencers and wannabe bodybuilders. The kind of place where people paid premium prices to be seen working out more than to actually get in shape. I knew the building well. I'd serviced their HVAC system twice in the past year. I also knew that Brent cut corners on maintenance to save money, which meant his climate control system was held together with duct tape and prayer. It would be a shame if something went wrong with it. I waited until Tuesday morning, when I knew Brent would be running his popular Influencer Hour class, a session specifically designed for people who wanted to film their workouts for social media. The gym was packed with 20-somethings in designer workout clothes, all recording themselves lifting weights and doing squats for their followers. Brent was in his element, strutting around in a tank top that showed off his steroid-enhanced physique, offering expert advice to anyone with a camera pointed at them. I slipped in through the service entrance using the key I'd kept from my previous repair visits. The HVAC system was in the basement, humming away like it had been for the past 15 years without proper maintenance. It didn't take much. A loosened valve here, a redirected vent there, and suddenly the gym's climate control system was pumping humid air instead of cool, dry circulation. Within 20 minutes, the temperature inside had risen 15 degrees and the humidity had turned the place into a sauna. I was back in my van, parked across the street, when the chaos began. First, the mirrors started fogging up. Then the equipment got slippery with condensation. The influencers, who depended on perfect lighting and clear video, started complaining that their content was ruined. But the real show started when the sprinkler system, triggered by the sudden temperature change, activated. 20-somethings in expensive workout clothes screamed and ran for the exits as water rained down on treadmills and weight machines. Phones and cameras were soaked. Makeup ran. Perfect hair was ruined. And in the middle of it all was Brent, standing in his flooded gym, shouting at his fleeing customers and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I rolled down my window and called out to him. "Hey, Brent, looks like you need an HVAC guy." He turned toward my voice, water dripping from his hair, and recognition dawned on his face. "You," he snarled, starting toward my van. "Me," I agreed, putting the van in drive. "By the way, congratulations on the baby. Hope you've got better insurance for child support than you do for your gym equipment." I drove away as he stood in the parking lot, soaked and furious, watching his business literally go down the drain. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The gym incident made the local news. "Popular fitness center flooded due to equipment failure," was the headline, though anyone who read Marcus's viral post could connect the dots. The comments section was brutal, with people sharing their own stories of Brent's arrogance and poor business practices. Within a week, Iron Paradise was closed permanently. Turns out, when your clientele consists entirely of image-conscious social media users, a public humiliation involving ruined phones and wet designer clothes is a death sentence. Brent tried to retaliate by showing up at my apartment, but I'd moved out the day after the confrontation dinner. Kara had been staying at Megan's place, so the apartment was empty when I came back with a moving truck and Rick's help to collect my belongings. I left behind anything we'd bought together and took only what was mine: my tools, my clothes, my books, and the dignity I'd finally reclaimed. My new place was a small apartment above Rick's bar. Not glamorous, but it was mine, and it came with a friend downstairs who had my back. "You know they're not going to let this go," Rick warned me one evening as we sat in the empty bar after closing. "Kara's been calling here every day, and her friends have been spreading their own version of the story." I'd heard. According to their narrative, I was a controlling, paranoid boyfriend who'd fabricated evidence to get out of taking responsibility for the pregnancy. They claimed the DNA tests were fake, the screenshots were doctored, and I was just a deadbeat trying to avoid child support. It might have worked, except Marcus had been thorough in documenting everything. The medical lab confirmed the authenticity of the paternity tests. The phone company verified the timestamps on the text messages, and several people came forward with their own stories of Kara and her friend's behavior. But the real vindication came from an unexpected source. Julia cracked first. The pressure of keeping up the lies, combined with her brother's disappointment and the public scrutiny, finally broke her down. She posted a long confession on social media, admitting to her role in the deception and apologizing to me specifically. "Adam Carson is a good man who deserved better than what we did to him," she wrote. "I participated in something cruel and dishonest, and I can't live with the guilt anymore. The DNA tests are real. The group chat screenshots are real. Everything he said happened exactly the way he said it did." The confession was like pulling a thread that unraveled the entire web of lies. Nina, faced with Julia's betrayal of their pact, lashed out with her own post, throwing Kara and Megan under the bus and revealing even more details about their scheme. "Kara planned this whole thing," Nina wrote. "She knew Adam would step up and take care of the babies no matter who the fathers were, because that's the kind of man he is. She called him her safety net and laughed about how easy it would be to manipulate him." The public reaction was swift and merciless. Kara lost her job when the story reached her employer. Megan's own relationship fell apart when her boyfriend learned about her role in the deception. David Chen, who'd been trying to stay out of the drama, was forced to acknowledge paternity and start paying support. But the final piece of justice came from Brent. Desperate to salvage his reputation and facing financial ruin from the gym closure, he made the mistake of trying to blackmail me. He claimed he had evidence that I'd sabotaged his business and threatened to go to the police unless I paid him $50,000. What he didn't know was that Marcus had been monitoring all their communications, and Rick had security cameras that covered the street outside the bar where I was living. When Brent showed up to make his demands in person, everything was recorded. "You destroyed my life," he said, cornering me in the alley behind the bar. "My business is gone, my reputation is shot, and now I've got child support to pay. You're going to make this right." "I didn't destroy your life, Brent," I replied calmly, knowing the cameras were rolling. "You destroyed your own life when you decided to sleep with another man's girlfriend and lie about it. You sabotaged my gym. Prove it." He couldn't, of course, and his attempt at extortion, captured on video, was the final nail in his coffin. The footage went viral alongside everything else, showing him for exactly what he was, a desperate man trying to blame everyone but himself for the consequences of his actions. The police were very interested in his blackmail attempt, though. Brent spent the next 6 months learning about consequences in a more direct way. As for Kara, she tried one last manipulation. She showed up at my apartment 3 months after the dinner party, claiming she wanted to apologize and start over. "I made mistakes," she said, standing in my doorway with tears in her eyes. "But we had something real, Adam. We can work through this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering love. Just emptiness where she used to live in my heart. "You're right," I said. "We did have something real. I had real love, real commitment, real plans for our future. What you had was a real good time at my expense. Please, Adam, I'm pregnant with triplets. I need help. You need help from the fathers of those children, all 3 of them." I closed the door and never saw her again. 6 months later, I heard through Rick that she'd moved back in with her mother and was working part-time at a call center. The 3 fathers were all paying court-ordered support, but none of them wanted anything to do with her personally. Nina had moved to another state to escape the social media attention. Julia had gotten therapy and was apparently doing better, though she and Marcus still weren't speaking. Megan had doubled down on her victim narrative until her own family got tired of her lies and cut her off. As for me, I was doing better than I had in years. My HVAC business was thriving, partly because the viral story had made me something of a local celebrity. People trusted someone who'd been through hell and come out honest on the other side. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners with women who appreciated straightforward communication and had their own lives figured out. And every morning when I woke up in my small apartment above Rick's bar, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let other people's lies become your reality. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. The triplets were born healthy, and according to Marcus, who'd reconciled with his sister and met his nephew, all 3 fathers were involved in their lives to varying degrees. The children would grow up knowing the truth about their parentage, which was more than they would have had if I'd stayed silent. And me? I was free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, free from people who saw my loyalty as weakness and my love as something to be exploited. I'd built my life brick by brick once before, only to discover someone else was living in my house. But this time, I was building with better materials and checking every foundation twice. This time, I was building something that would last.